The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the pristine research and development floor of Autotech Corporation, casting harsh shadows across the polished concrete floors that reflected the sterile perfection of corporate efficiency. The air carried the sharp scent of metal polish mixed with electrical components and the faint ozone smell of high-tech machinery running at full capacity. Marcus Williams adjusted his worn work coveralls, the fabric soft from countless washes and bearing the honest stains of years spent working with his hands. His dark hands moved with practiced precision over the gleaming hybrid engine that had been giving the company's top engineers headaches for weeks. The prototype sat like a mechanical puzzle waiting to be solved, its polished surfaces hiding problems that had stumped some of the brightest minds in automotive engineering. He might as well have been invisible to the team of well-dressed engineers clustered around the mahogany conference table nearby, their voices carrying the confident tone of people who had never been questioned about their right to occupy space in rooms like this one. Sarah Mitchell stood at the head of the group like a general commanding her troops, her designer suit immaculate despite the industrial setting and tailored to project authority that came from climbing corporate ladders rather than understanding the technology she managed. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun that matched the sharp angles of her face, each strand precisely positioned to complement the cold calculation in her blue eyes. She possessed the kind of polished appearance that corporate America rewarded with promotions and corner offices, all surface competence and boardroom presence that impressed executives but often obscured actual understanding. The way she gestured at charts and diagrams suggested someone more comfortable with PowerPoint presentations than getting her hands dirty with actual engineering work. When she noticed Marcus examining the prototype with the focused attention of someone who actually understood what he was looking at, her expression shifted from professional competence to pure disgust. The transformation was immediate and ugly, revealing the prejudice that lurked beneath her polished exterior like rot hidden behind fresh paint. "Hey, you there! The black guy?" Her voice cut across the room like a whip crack, sharp with authority and dripping with disdain. "Who the hell let you in here? This isn't some street garage where you can just walk in and mess with expensive equipment." The other engineers looked up from their tablets and blueprints with expressions ranging from embarrassment to cruel anticipation, some clearly uncomfortable with her tone, while others seemed to feed off the drama. The room fell silent, except for the steady hum of the ventilation system and the soft electronic beeping of monitoring equipment. Sarah's perfectly manicured finger pointed at Marcus like an accusation, her entire body language screaming that he was an intruder in her sterile world of advanced engineering. Her voice carried the particular venom of someone who felt threatened by the presence of anyone who didn't fit her narrow definition of who belonged in positions requiring technical authority. Marcus straightened up slowly, his movements deliberate and controlled in the way that comes from years of facing this kind of treatment without losing composure. Decades of encountering prejudice had taught him that reacting with anger would only confirm their worst assumptions about him. His voice remained calm and professional when he spoke, carrying just a hint of the education that Sarah's prejudice prevented her from recognizing. "I was assigned to inspect this engine, ma'am. There appears to be a recurring issue with the cooling system integration that's been causing performance inconsistencies." He spoke with the kind of precise technical language that should have given any reasonable person pause. His dark eyes met hers steadily, showing neither defiance nor submission, just the quiet dignity of someone who knew his worth, regardless of others' inability to recognize it. The confidence in his posture suggested someone completely comfortable with complex machinery, despite their attempts to make him feel like an outsider. Sarah's laugh was harsh and theatrical, designed to ensure everyone in the room understood exactly what she thought of Marcus's claim to technical competence. The sound echoed off the sterile walls like breaking glass, sharp and cutting, and intended to draw blood from its target while entertaining her audience. You? Inspect this engine? This $50 million prototype that represents 5 years of advanced research and development? She turned to her colleagues with exaggerated disbelief, playing to her audience like a performer on stage. Did you all hear that? This black guy thinks he understands cutting-edge automotive technology better than our team of certified engineers. Her voice rose with each word, feeding off the uncomfortable energy in the room like a parasite that grew stronger from others' discomfort. Some engineers shifted nervously in their seats, recognizing the line she was crossing, but lacking the moral courage to speak up. The performance was calculated to be as humiliating as possible, designed to put Marcus in his place and remind everyone else of the unspoken hierarchies that governed their workplace. The cruelty in her voice escalated as she warmed to her performance, her professional mask slipping completely to reveal the ugly prejudice that lurked beneath her corporate polish. What can you possibly do that we haven't already tried? Change oil in some ghetto garage? Pump tires at a gas station? Maybe wash cars in the parking lot for tips? Each suggestion was delivered with increasing venom, her words chosen specifically to diminish and dehumanize while reinforcing every racist stereotype she could summon. The other engineers exchanged glances that ranged from shame to sick fascination, some looking away in embarrassment while others leaned forward with morbid curiosity. Sarah's face was flushed with the kind of righteous anger that bigots feel when confronted with challenges to their worldview, her hands gesturing wildly as she built toward what she clearly intended as a devastating crescendo. The performance revealed someone who derived genuine pleasure from the systematic humiliation of others, particularly those she considered beneath her station in life. Her voice carried the particular cruelty of someone who had never faced real consequences for her actions and believed she never would. "Tell you what," Sarah announced with the theatrical flourish of someone delivering what she thought was a killing blow. "If you can actually fix this engine, this incredibly complex piece of machinery that our best engineers have been struggling with for months, I'll marry you and give you half my assets." The room erupted in laughter that ranged from genuine amusement to nervous discomfort, all of it feeding Sarah's sense of superiority and validation. But when you fail, and you will fail spectacularly, you'll get down on your knees and apologize to everyone here for wasting our valuable time with your ridiculous delusions. She clapped her hands mockingly, the sound sharp and cruel in the sterile air. Several engineers pulled out their phones with practiced ease, anticipating the kind of viral humiliation that would follow Marcus for the rest of his life. The moment felt orchestrated, as if Sarah had been waiting for an opportunity exactly like this to demonstrate her power and reinforce the social order she believed in. But something unexpected happened in the moment that followed, a shift in energy that even Sarah's cruelty couldn't completely suppress or control. Marcus remained utterly still for 10 long seconds, his gaze fixed on the engine with an intensity that seemed to pierce through its metal casing and into its mechanical soul. The laughter gradually died away as people began to notice his complete lack of reaction to their mockery, his stillness creating a pocket of calm in the storm of their cruelty. When he finally looked up, there was something different in his dark eyes, a quiet confidence that made even Sarah's cruel smile falter slightly. The change in the room's energy was subtle, but unmistakable, like the moment before lightning strikes, when the air itself seems to hold its breath. His presence seemed to expand somehow, filling more space than his physical form should have occupied, commanding attention through sheer force of quiet competence. The transformation was so complete that several people stepped back unconsciously, recognizing that they might have misjudged the situation entirely. "Are you certain about that challenge?" Marcus asked, his voice carrying a weight that hadn't been there before, each word measured and deliberate, like someone who understood the full implications of what was being offered. There was something in his tone that suggested he knew things they didn't, secrets hidden behind his calm exterior that could change everything if revealed at the right moment. He stepped closer to the engine with the fluid grace of someone completely comfortable in his environment, despite their attempts to make him feel otherwise. His weathered hands, scarred from years of honest work, but possessing a surgeon's precision, moved over the machinery with surprising gentleness that spoke to deep respect for the technology he was examining. When he placed his palms on the engine surface and closed his eyes, the gesture looked almost mystical, as if he were communicating with the machine itself through some form of mechanical intuition that transcended formal education. The silence stretched for several heartbeats, broken only by the steady hum of machinery and the sound of people holding their breath without realizing it. "Interesting, very interesting," he murmured, his voice so low that people had to strain to hear him, creating an intimacy that drew everyone closer despite their earlier mockery. When his eyes opened, they seemed to glow with inner knowledge, carrying the confidence of someone who had just confirmed suspicions that others couldn't even imagine. He fixed his gaze directly on Sarah's increasingly uncertain face, and the contact felt charged with electricity that made her step back involuntarily. The transformation in the room was palpable. Where there had been mockery and cruelty, now there was growing unease as people began to sense that something important was happening. "You know something. This engine is talking to me," Marcus said with a mysterious smile that made several engineers step back unconsciously. "And it's telling me that you're about to have a very big problem that's going to make this whole conversation very memorable." His words hung in the air like a prophecy, and even Sarah seemed momentarily speechless. Just then, the elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and Tom Harrison Jr., the company's general manager, burst into the room with the hurried energy of someone dealing with multiple crises. His usually perfect hair was slightly disheveled, and there were stress lines around his eyes that spoke to sleepless nights and impossible deadlines. Marcus turned toward him with that same mysterious smile, as if Tom's arrival was part of some larger plan that only Marcus understood. "Mr. Harrison, you should have this system checked immediately," Marcus said, his voice carrying an authority that seemed to come from nowhere, but felt completely natural. The suggestion was delivered not as a recommendation from a subordinate, but as advice from someone who understood things that others missed. "Why? Is there something wrong?" Tom asked, his brow furrowed with the kind of concern that comes from managing a project where every day of delay costs millions of dollars. His eyes darted between Marcus and the engine, trying to understand what he had walked into. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut, and Tom could sense that something significant had just happened. Sarah opened her mouth to explain, but Marcus spoke first, his voice cutting through her intended words like a sword through silk. Marcus's smile grew more enigmatic, carrying secrets that seemed to dance just behind his eyes. All I know is that in a few hours, everyone will remember this conversation. The words were delivered with the certainty of someone who could see the future, or perhaps someone who had already planned it. He turned back to Sarah, whose face had gone pale as she began to realize that she might have underestimated the quiet man in the worn coveralls. "And about that marriage proposal?" Marcus paused, letting the tension build like a master storyteller approaching a crucial plot point. "I'll consider it." With that simple statement, Marcus Williams walked away, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence that filled the room. Every eye followed his departure, and the casual confidence in his stride suggested that he was leaving not in defeat, but as someone who had just set a larger plan in motion. Sarah's hand shook as she fumbled for her phone, frantically Googling Marcus Williams, but finding nothing that could explain the quiet confidence of the man who had just turned her world upside down. The laughter that had filled the room just minutes before now seemed like a distant memory, replaced by an atmosphere of uncertainty and anticipation. The modest apartment in the Bronx, where Marcus Williams lived with his mother, told a story of dignity maintained despite financial hardship. The walls were clean, but showed their age, painted in warm colors that made the small space feel larger and more welcoming than its square footage suggested. Family photos covered every available surface: graduation pictures, birthday celebrations, images of his father in his prime, all arranged with the kind of care that spoke to love rather than wealth. The apartment smelled of Martha's evening cooking, a rich mixture of spices and comfort that had welcomed Marcus home every day since childhood. Her soft humming drifted from the kitchen, occasionally punctuated by the sound of her evening prayers, creating a soundtrack of maternal love that had sustained him through the darkest moments of his life. But it was the garage below that truly revealed the depth of Marcus Williams' character and ambition. Williams Auto Repair bore his late father's name in faded letters above the entrance, and every tool, every piece of equipment, every carefully organized workspace spoke to a legacy of excellence passed down through generations. The garage was immaculately maintained, despite its age, with tools arranged with military precision and work areas that gleamed despite decades of honest use. This was more than a business. It was a temple to the dignity of skilled labor and the pursuit of mechanical perfection. The smell of motor oil and metal polish created an atmosphere of serious work, while the soft classical music that Marcus always played added an unexpected touch of sophistication to the industrial setting. Each evening, after long days working at various repair jobs around the city, Marcus would retreat to his computer in a corner of the garage, diving deep into advanced engineering courses with the hunger of someone who understood that knowledge was his only path to a better life. The bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering hanging on the wall was invisible to employers who couldn't see past the color of his skin, but it represented years of night classes, weekend study sessions, and sacrifices that had cost him relationships and social opportunities. His bookshelf was filled with technical manuals and engineering textbooks that he had purchased used and studied until their pages were worn soft. The online courses he completed each night covered everything from advanced materials science to cutting-edge propulsion systems, all pursued with the methodical determination of someone who refused to let circumstances define his potential. His most treasured possession sat prominently on his workbench, like a shrine to his father's memory. the old toolbox that had been Robert Williams' constant companion for 30 years of automotive repair. The metal was weathered and worn, but maintained with religious care, its surface scarred by decades of honest work, but polished to a soft gleam that spoke to love and respect. Carved into its surface in his father's careful handwriting were the words, "Excellence has no color," a phrase that had become Marcus's personal creed and guiding philosophy. Inside that box, hidden among the conventional tools of the automotive trade, was a USB drive containing 5 years of revolutionary hybrid engine research that Marcus had conducted in absolute secrecy. The drive represented innovations that could revolutionize the automotive industry, but remained hidden like buried treasure, waiting for the right moment to see daylight. Martha Williams shuffled into the garage that evening, her movements careful but determined, despite the diabetes that had slowly stolen her strength over the past decade. At 65, she still carried herself with the dignity of someone who had spent 40 years as a respected nurse, helping others and raising a son who made her proud every single day. Her kind eyes, still sharp despite her age, took in her son's troubled expression with the practiced skill of someone who had been reading people's pain for most of her adult life. She settled into the old chair that Marcus had placed near his workbench specifically for her visits, the cushions worn soft by countless evenings of shared conversation and mutual support. "Son, what's weighing on your heart tonight?" she asked, her voice carrying the gentle authority of someone who had comforted thousands of patients and always knew exactly the right thing to say. Her hands, wrinkled but still steady, reached out to touch the toolbox that represented so much of their family's history and hopes. Martha had been present for every moment of Marcus's education, celebrating each degree and certificate as if it were a Nobel Prize, understanding better than anyone the obstacles he had overcome to achieve what others took for granted. She had seen him face rejection after rejection, watched him swallow his pride and dignity in situations that would have broken lesser men, but she had also seen the fire in his eyes that refused to be extinguished. Her faith in his potential had never wavered, even when his own confidence sometimes faltered under the weight of constant rejection and discrimination. Marcus looked up from the engine component he was studying, his expression reflecting the weight of years of accumulated frustration and occasional despair. "Mama, sometimes I wonder if it's worth it. All this learning, all this work, all these innovations that nobody will ever see, when people look at me and only see." He gestured toward his reflection in the polished surface of a nearby tool, the image distorted but clear enough to show the skin color that seemed to define how the world saw him. His voice carried the exhaustion of someone who had been fighting the same battle for too long without seeing meaningful progress. The workspace around them was filled with evidence of his brilliance, sketches, calculations, prototype components that represented solutions to problems that multi-million-dollar corporations couldn't solve. "See what, baby?" Martha's voice was gentle but firm, carrying the kind of strength that had sustained her through decades of discrimination in her own profession. She had faced her own battles as a black woman in medicine, fighting for respect and recognition in a field that often dismissed her contributions. They see what they choose to see, but the knowledge in your head, the skill in your hands, the innovations you've created, nobody can take that away from you. Don't let them define you by the color of your skin. Her words carried the weight of lived experience and hard-won wisdom. She pointed to his father's toolbox with hands that trembled slightly, but remained purposeful. Your daddy taught you that excellence speaks for itself. Sometimes it just takes time for the world to listen, and sometimes you have to make them listen. Marcus nodded, pulling out his worn notebook filled with sketches and calculations that represented years of nocturnal innovation. The pages contained detailed drawings of engine modifications, efficiency improvements, and completely new approaches to automotive engineering that could revolutionize multiple industries. Each diagram was annotated with precise calculations and theoretical projections that demonstrated not just creativity, but rigorous scientific methodology. These innovations remained hidden in his notebook, waiting for an opportunity that might never come, like seeds in a drought waiting for rain. He had learned long ago that being right wasn't enough. Timing, presentation, and political navigation were equally important in a world that judged people by appearances rather than abilities. The sound of work boots on concrete announced the arrival of Tommy Rodriguez, Marcus's father's old partner and surrogate uncle, who had helped raise him after Robert Williams' death. At 50 years old, Tommy had the weathered hands and bent back of a lifelong mechanic, but also the loyal heart of someone who understood that family wasn't always about blood relations. His arrival brought with it the comforting smell of coffee and the easy familiarity of someone who had been part of Marcus's life since childhood. Tommy's face showed the concern of someone who had heard about the day's events through the neighborhood grapevine and understood exactly what his surrogate nephew was facing. "Marcus, I heard about what happened at Autotech today," Tommy said, his voice heavy with the kind of protective anger that comes from watching someone you love being mistreated. He had experienced his own share of discrimination in the automotive industry, working for shops that paid him less and promoted him slower simply because of his Latino heritage. "You sure you want to go back there tomorrow? Places like that, they don't change. They just find new ways to make you miserable until you quit." His words came from experience and genuine concern, but also from the weariness of someone who had fought similar battles and wasn't sure the victories were worth the cost. Marcus looked at both of them, the two people who believed in him unconditionally when the world seemed determined to tear him down at every opportunity. Their faces showed love, concern, and absolute faith in his abilities, even when he sometimes doubted himself. "I have to, Tommy. Sometimes running away just means you'll have to face the same fight somewhere else, and I'm tired of running." His voice carried new determination, as if something had crystallized during the day's confrontation. "Maybe it's time to stop hiding who I really am." The decision seemed to settle over him like armor, protecting him from doubt and fear. Martha reached over and squeezed her son's hand with fingers that had comforted thousands of patients and always knew exactly when human contact was needed most. "Then you go back there and show them who you really are. But do it safely, baby. Do it smart. Your daddy used to say that the best revenge is living well and proving them wrong." Her words carried the accumulated wisdom of a lifetime, spent navigating a world that often didn't value people who looked like her son. She had seen too many brilliant young people destroyed by systems designed to exclude them, and she was determined that Marcus would be different. As the night deepened around them, Marcus opened his laptop and began reviewing the technical documentation he had spent years perfecting in absolute secrecy. Each diagram, each calculation, each theoretical breakthrough represented not just his intelligence, but his dreams for a world where innovation could transcend prejudice and human potential could be judged on its merits rather than appearances. The screen's glow illuminated his face as he scrolled through innovations that could change everything. If only he could find a way to reveal them without destroying himself in the process. He didn't know that tomorrow would test everything he had ever learned about courage, dignity, and the true meaning of excellence. The toolbox sat silent on the workbench beside him, its carved message waiting to be proven once again in the harsh light of corporate America. 1 hour after Marcus's cryptic warning had left the Autotech engineering team in confused silence, Sarah Mitchell's fury had reached a boiling point that threatened to consume what remained of her professional judgment. She paced behind her desk like a caged predator, her perfectly styled hair beginning to show signs of the stress that was eating away at her composure. The image of Marcus's confident smile burned in her memory like acid, and the way he had spoken to Tom Harrison with casual familiarity suggested connections that she didn't understand and couldn't control. The thought of being challenged by someone she considered beneath her station was more than her pride could tolerate, and her need to reassert dominance over the situation was becoming an obsession that clouded her judgment. "Mr. Harrison!" she barked as Tom Jr. returned from his meeting, her voice carrying the sharp edge of someone whose authority had been questioned publicly for the first time in her career. The other engineers in the room looked up nervously, recognizing the dangerous tone that usually preceded someone's termination or public humiliation. "I want that man to prove himself right now, in front of everyone, so we can put this ridiculous charade to rest once and for all." Her demand was delivered with the kind of righteous indignation that comes from someone who has never been wrong and refuses to consider the possibility that they might be starting now. The veins in her neck stood out as she spoke, and her hands clenched into fists that betrayed the violence of her emotions. Tom hesitated, his natural caution warring with his unwillingness to challenge Sarah's authority in front of her subordinates. He glanced between Sarah's flushed face and the expensive prototype engine, calculating the potential costs of either decision. "Sarah, are you sure about this? What if he actually finds something? What if he makes it worse?" His questions carried the reasonable concerns of someone managing a multi-million-dollar project, but Sarah was beyond the reach of reasonable concerns. "I don't care about what-ifs!" Sarah's voice rose to near hysteria, causing several junior engineers to exchange worried glances. "Marcus, if you really detected a problem, you have 2 hours to fix it." Her challenge echoed through the room with the finality of a judge pronouncing sentence. "And when he fails, he'll get down on his knees and apologize as promised." The image seemed to give her particular satisfaction, and her smile took on a predatory quality that made even her supporters uncomfortable. What followed was 2 hours of systematic sabotage disguised as professional oversight. Sarah began by having the maintenance team hide the specialized tools that Marcus would need, claiming they were being inventoried for insurance purposes. She personally oversaw the removal of diagnostic equipment that would have made the job significantly easier, each action justified by corporate policies that she selectively enforced only when it served her purposes. Next, she ordered the auxiliary power systems shut down throughout the testing area, forcing Marcus to work in dim emergency lighting that made precision work nearly impossible. When junior engineers tried to assist Marcus by providing additional lighting from their personal devices, she quickly put a stop to it with threats about unauthorized equipment and safety violations. But perhaps the most insidious element of Sarah's campaign was her decision to live-stream the entire ordeal on social media, turning Marcus's professional challenge into a public spectacle designed to humiliate him before a global audience. "Look, everyone, This black guy is trying to fix a $50 million engine. This should be entertaining," she announced to her phone camera, her voice dripping with cruel anticipation. Her followers multiplied by the thousands as the video spread across platforms, each share accompanied by comments that ranged from supportive to viciously racist. The livestream created a feedback loop of cruelty, with Sarah feeding off the energy of her online audience while they encouraged her to escalate her harassment. Despite the deliberately impossible conditions, Marcus worked with methodical precision that bordered on the supernatural, using only basic tools and relying on an intuitive understanding of machinery that seemed to transcend normal human capabilities. His hands moved with confident purpose even in the poor lighting, and his breathing remained steady despite the pressure of dozens of eyes watching his every move and hundreds more watching online. He approached the engine like a physician examining a patient, touching different components and listening to sounds that others couldn't even hear. His movements were economical and purposeful, suggesting that he understood the machine at a level that formal education alone couldn't provide. Lisa Wilson, a 28-year-old engineer who had been observing quietly, began to recognize that Marcus wasn't just randomly poking at components in hopes of stumbling onto a solution. Instead, he was following a logical diagnostic process that she had only seen in advanced textbooks, but had never witnessed implemented with such natural fluency. When she tried to point this out to her colleagues, Sarah's icy stare warned her to maintain silence or risk joining Marcus as a target of institutional harassment. James Thompson, a 45-year-old black engineer who had survived his own battles with workplace discrimination, watched Marcus work with growing admiration mixed with familiar fear. He had seen talented black professionals destroyed by similar setups, their careers ended not by lack of ability, but by systems designed to ensure their failure. Yet something about Marcus's calm competence told him this situation might be different. Still, when he attempted to offer subtle guidance, Sarah had security escort him from the room for unauthorized interference. As the 2-hour deadline approached, something impossible began to happen. The engine that had confounded Autotech's best engineers for weeks suddenly roared to life, with a smooth, powerful hum that filled the room with mechanical harmony. The sound was perfect. No grinding, no irregular rhythms, no signs of the stress that had plagued previous attempts. Marcus had not only diagnosed the multiple problems, but had corrected them using techniques that none of the watching professionals fully understood. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the steady purr of an engine that finally worked as designed. Sarah's face drained of color, but her pride wouldn't allow her to accept defeat gracefully. "This is sabotage!" she screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria. "He broke it first and then pretended to fix it." The accusation hung in the air like poison, desperate and illogical, but delivered with enough conviction to plant seeds of doubt. She turned to her live stream camera with wild eyes. "He's stolen inside information. This is industrial espionage." Her accusations became increasingly bizarre and desperate, each one contradicting the last but delivered with absolute certainty. The accusation of espionage provided Sarah with the excuse she needed to escalate the situation beyond mere professional disagreement into the realm of criminal activity. Security guards approached Marcus with handcuffs gleaming under the harsh lights, their faces showing uncomfortable recognition that they were being used as tools in someone else's personal vendetta. Marcus submitted to the restraints with quiet dignity, understanding that resistance would only provide his enemies with additional ammunition. As he was led away, Lisa Wilson and James Thompson exchanged meaningful glances, both recognizing that they had witnessed something extraordinary, but finding themselves powerless to intervene. In the security office, Marcus sat quietly as the guards prepared paperwork for his transfer to police custody. The toolbox his father had given him sat on the table, like evidence of a crime he hadn't committed. But when his phone rang and he heard his mother's voice, something shifted in his demeanor like armor clicking into place. "Ah, son, I saw you on the internet. The whole world is watching," Martha said, her voice filled with a mixture of pride and concern. "It's time to show them who you really are. Your daddy would have said the same thing. Sometimes you have to stop hiding your light under a bushel." Her words carried the weight of a lifetime spent watching her son struggle against systems designed to exclude him. Marcus looked at his father's toolbox and made a decision that would change everything. "I need to make a phone call," he told the security guard, his voice carrying new authority that made the man step back unconsciously. "And I need someone to know that I work for William Harrison Sr." Those words hung in the air like a revelation, suggesting connections and relationships that nobody in the building had suspected. Just as those words left his mouth, the sound of expensive tires on pavement announced the arrival of a vehicle that would turn this entire situation on its head. Through the security office window, Marcus could see a pristine Rolls-Royce pulling up to the Autotech building, the same car he had serviced just hours earlier, though nobody else knew about that connection yet. Marcus smiled with quiet satisfaction as he realized that his carefully laid plans were finally coming to fruition. The real game was about to begin, and this time he would be playing by his own rules. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and William Harrison Sr. stepped into the Autotech lobby with the quiet authority of a man accustomed to being the most powerful person in any room. At 70 years old, he moved with the confidence of someone who had built empires and toppled kingdoms. His silver hair was perfectly styled, and his handmade suit probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. Sarah Mitchell rushed toward him, her live stream still running, desperate to control the narrative. "Mr. Harrison Sr., you shouldn't be meeting with that criminal. He's dangerous." William Sr.'s ice-blue eyes fixed on Sarah with laser intensity. "Criminal? You're talking about the genius who just fixed my 1960 Rolls-Royce." Sarah's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air as William Sr. continued towards the security office. When he reached Marcus, there was a respectful smile that spoke to years of familiarity. "Hello, Mr. Harrison. You're looking well." William Sr.'s stern expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Marcus, I've been following your situation. I think it's time the world knew exactly who you are." Sarah had followed them, her phone still streaming. "Who is he? He's just a black mechanic. A saboteur." William Sr. turned slowly, his voice carrying absolute authority. "Marcus Williams is my chief technology advisor. He has designed 80% of the technology in the Harrison Group and has reported directly to me for the past 5 years. The silence was deafening. Sarah's face went through a spectrum of colors as the implications crashed over her. Marcus stood up, and suddenly his entire demeanor shifted from detained suspect to corporate executive. "Hello, Sarah," Marcus said, his voice now carrying unmistakable authority. "I'm the person who advised Mr. Harrison about purchasing stock in Autotech. Every major technology decision in the Harrison Group has crossed my desk." William Sr. nodded grimly. "For 5 years, Marcus has been the most trusted advisor in my entire organization. He maintains my personal vehicles, develops our proprietary technology, and has generated more innovation than entire departments of other companies. But Sarah's pride and prejudice wouldn't allow graceful defeat. "This is fake! They've planned this together! It's a conspiracy!" She screamed, her live stream capturing every moment of her meltdown. "If you want to protect him, then prove he's actually talented." William Sr.'s smile was sharp as a blade. "You want a challenge? I'll give you one." Sarah's desperation made her reckless. 3 broken vintage cars. Whoever fixes the most in 1 hour wins. Her live stream audience watched in fascination as she essentially bet her career on a contest she couldn't possibly win. Marcus stepped forward with calm confidence. "I accept. But if I win, you'll apologize to every black person you've hurt with your prejudice." Sarah's response was captured for posterity. "Deal! And when I win, you'll kneel down and apologize on camera." Within 30 minutes, the Autotech lobby had been transformed into an arena. 3 vintage cars sat in the center. A 1965 Ferrari with a seized engine, a 1970 Aston Martin with electrical failures, and a 1963 Porsche with transmission problems. Sarah chose the Ferrari, assuming it would be easiest. Marcus calmly walked to the Aston Martin, the most complex of the 3. 60 minutes on the clock," William Sr. announced. "Let's see what real expertise looks like." What followed was a masterclass in mechanical engineering disguised as a simple repair job. Marcus didn't just fix the Aston Martin. He diagnosed its problems with surgical precision, explained each issue to the watching crowd, and implemented solutions that revealed a depth of knowledge that left professional engineers speechless. Sarah, meanwhile, struggled with the Ferrari's relatively simple problems, her movements becoming increasingly frantic as she realized she was being outclassed. But the real revelation came when Marcus finished the Aston Martin 20 minutes early and began drawing technical diagrams on a whiteboard. He wasn't just showing how he had fixed one car, he was designing a hybrid engine system for a 20-ton truck, live, in front of hundreds of witnesses and a global streaming audience. "This is impossible," whispered one of Autotech's senior engineers. "Those calculations are perfect." Lisa Wilson stepped forward, her voice carrying clearly. "Marcus, I owe you an apology. You're not just talented, you're brilliant." James Thompson spoke up for the first time. "Sarah threatened me when I tried to help Marcus earlier. She said supporting him would cost me my job." The crowd's murmur grew louder as more employees began sharing their own stories of Sarah's discriminatory behavior. But the moment that broke everything wide open came when Tom Harrison Jr. stepped forward. "Sir, I apologize for not recognizing your position. I've let my prejudices blind me to your expertise." The word "sir" echoed through the lobby like a thunderclap. Suddenly, everyone understood that they weren't just watching a repair demonstration. They were witnessing a complete inversion of the power structure they thought they knew. William Sr. stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen, let me make something very clear. Marcus Williams holds a position in the Harrison Group that outranks most of the executives in this building. He reports directly to me and has decision-making authority over all technology implementations across our entire portfolio." Sarah made one final, desperate attempt. "This is all planned! They're trying to make me look bad!" But William Sr. was done with patience. "Marcus, show them what Harrison Premium technology looks like." Tommy Rodriguez wheeled out a case of specialized tools and components that gleamed with cutting-edge quality. Marcus opened the case and began working on the Autotech prototype with complete confidence. In 15 minutes, he had upgraded the engine with Harrison Group's most closely guarded technological secrets. When he started it up, the sound was unlike anything anyone had ever heard. Smooth as silk, powerful as thunder, efficient beyond anything Autotech had ever produced. This is Harrison Premium Technology, Williams Sr. announced. Until today it was classified, but I think it's time the world saw what real innovation looks like. Williams Sr. placed his hand on Marcus's shoulder. Everyone, this is Marcus Williams, the man I trust more than my own son when it comes to technology and innovation. Marcus turned to Sarah one final time. About that marriage proposal, I decline. Not because you're not good enough for me, but because I already have a family, the Harrison Group family. The applause was thunderous, but it was the sound of justice finally being served that resonated most powerfully. That same evening, Williams Harrison Innovations was born in the very lobby where Marcus had been vindicated. This company will be headquartered in the Bronx, Marcus announced to the cameras, in the neighborhood where I grew up. It will be a symbol that innovation has no zip code and talent has no color. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, 50 engineers had submitted resumes. 3 major universities had offered Marcus visiting professor positions, and Tesla, Apple, and Google had all called seeking partnerships. Lisa Wilson became the company's first CTO, stating, "I want to work for someone who sees potential instead of prejudice." James Thompson accepted the position of engineering director. Even Tommy Rodriguez traded his coveralls for a suit as operations manager. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came when Martha Williams was escorted into the lobby by Williams Sr. himself. "Mrs. Williams," he said with genuine respect, "your son is one of the finest men I've ever known. Thank you for raising him to be who he is." 1 month later, Marcus was test driving the first prototype when he spotted Sarah working at a small suburban garage. He pulled over and walked toward her. When she saw him, she straightened up, her face showing shame and exhaustion. "Marcus," she said quietly, "is there any chance you could forgive me?" Marcus studied her for a long moment. "Sarah, I'm not angry with you. In fact, I'm grateful." "Grateful? You showed me what the world really looks like for people who look like me. You made me stronger, and you gave me the chance to prove that excellence really has no color." Marcus pulled out a business card. "We need a quality control manager, $80,000 a year. The question is, are you ready to learn how to respect talent when you see it?" Sarah stared at the card. "Why would you offer me this?" "Because everyone deserves a second chance to be better than they were." 6 months later, Williams Harrison Innovations had become the fastest-growing technology company in America. The Talent Beyond Color scholarship program had provided opportunities for thousands of young people. Marcus had been named Person of the Year by Time magazine. The story concluded back in the garage where it all began. Marcus sat holding his father's toolbox, with William Sr. finding him there one evening. "Any regrets, Marcus?" "None," Marcus replied. "Everything happened exactly as it needed to." "Why do you say that?" Marcus smiled. "Because now millions of people believe they can do the impossible too." His voice carried clearly. "Talent doesn't choose your skin color, your hometown, or the family you're born into. It only needs one thing, the courage to show itself. The question isn't, why me, but why not me?" The camera pulled back slowly, showing Marcus silhouetted against the warm light, still holding his father's toolbox, still believing in the power of excellence to overcome any obstacle. The words carved into that toolbox, "Excellence has no color," had been proven true once again. And somewhere in the darkness beyond, young people who had been told they didn't belong were sitting a little straighter, dreaming a little bigger, and asking themselves the same question. Why not me? The story ended, but the inspiration it created would continue forever.